Hi, everyone. We're back with another podcast episode, and I'm excited to introduce Beverly to all of you. I have been a guest on her podcast, and we had a real good conversation about all kinds of stuff, galactic stuff, Akashic records, the nature of time. I know that it was really quantum and really interesting. And so I wanted to have her on my podcast so that you can get to know her, so that we can just have a casual chat, a nice metaphysical conversation. And we will just see where it goes, as always. So, can you introduce yourself to the listeners?
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm Beverly Danielle, and my account you were talking about is Hummingbird Energy Healing. And I do a lot of tarot readings and life coaching, breath work, all kinds of things like that on the sense of healing journeys. Because I went through, a difficult childhood and got into, dark night of the soul and all sorts of like unusual awakenings and weird things happening that caused me to question deeper, I guess. That's always me as a Gemini. I'm always trying to figure out the why behind everything. That's sort of like what makes me tick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to. There's just this point where they start wondering and digging deeper, and that's how a lot of this just kind of spontaneously happens often.
Yeah. The difficult part right now is like discernment is really hard. When there's like too much information coming at you, it's really hard to kind of discern everything. So it's almost like that forest for the trees saying. So you have to, kind of take a step back and ask, like, okay, what am I looking at? What actually resonates? Because different things will resonate for different people. So you always have to kind of tune into your own inner truth. But it's just there's a lot out there. And with so much access, with the internet, it's just like, oh my goodness, like weeding through all this information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. And I feel I said something about that online a little few days ago. The internet is really good because it allows everyone to share their experience, to make their spiritual experiences more accessible. But it's like you said, there's so much information that it can be an overload and it can be confusing. And then you're just going to say, never mind, it's too much. So it's really valuable that we have podcasts like this, that we have people that are sharing, and then it's just up to each individual to really discern who feels good to you, like who could help me, who feels like they are resonating with what I need, kind of.
Yeah. And almost like who's like inspiring you, but not so much that you're losing sense of self. Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people really get into it and they're like, oh my God, like they start like quoting the person. And I'm like, okay, like how about you
Yeah.
translate what that means to you and not just sort of regurgitating the information, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because I think, like in your work and in my work, because I read a little bit about you earlier today, like your readings are really focused on the now. Your tarot readings, they're not really about, oh, what is my future going to hold? And that's also something that I recognize in myself, that we try to bring the person really to the now moment and empower them in this now experience. And that they hold all the power, basically. They get to manifest what they want, and we're giving them the information of what we feel in their field, basically.
Right. Or sometimes it's almost like giving them confirmation of stuff they already knew, but they need to kind of hear it from someone else to get it to be like, oh, okay, let me pay more attention to that. Or
Mm-hmm.
noticing the blind spots, like what are they not noticing? Or, where are they blocked or held back from creating the life that they want? Because it's almost like you're creating the future as you go. It's not necessarily written. I mean, sure, there's certain key points you're going to hit, but it's almost like that saying, like all roads lead here. So it's like however you go or whatever decisions you make, you're going to hit certain signposts along the way and meet certain people. It's like that other saying, it's like what's for you is going to find you.
Yeah, because we're often thinking, because I just saw that also in a session that I had yesterday with a client, and she was like, I was afraid that I was not doing enough, that my clients weren't finding me, that I was kind of panicking, like, am I actually doing this right? And what came through was clearly like, yes, you are, because you are doing everything that makes you happy, the things that you're passionate about. And if you're in alignment with your passion, the rest is automatically going to be magnetized to you or the right people.
That makes sense. Because for me, I get either too much inquisitive or too much doing the self-work that I forget to have fun along the way. So I'm always getting these little reminders, like you need to like let loose and like live a little and have fun. It doesn't have to be so serious all the time.
Yeah, I think that's a problem that a lot of us have when we have this strong urge to serve, to help. Then we make our entire life about helping and about doing this work. And then it's like, hey, you can also take a break. And that's something that I really had to learn the hard way. But many of us go through that because we're constantly just wanting for people to see or to like see things the way we see them. Not that how other people see things isn't correct, but because we see how much we have been helped by embracing these new perspectives and insights that we just want everyone to have that experience.
That makes sense. I mean, like you said, learning it the hard way, because it's almost like
Mm-hmm.
you had asked before we started recording about law enforcement, and I was sort of identifying myself with that position so much that the universe was like, no, like you are not just your day job, you're so much more. And then I hadn't
Mm-hmm.
realized that I not only was doing that, but I was also suffering from burnout, like trying to hold it all together, trying to do all these things, trying to be a parent, trying this, that, and the other. And it's like burning the candle on both ends. You can only do it for so long before it's going to catch up with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're kind of expected by society to do everything perfectly, to be the perfect parent, to be perfect at your job, be perfect in society, all these things, be the perfect child, be the perfect parent, all this stuff.
And have all your
And
stuff together and be producing. Like if you're not producing, you're nothing.
mm-hmm, yeah, and it's like that's what value is measured upon, like how much are you contributing that other people can benefit from. But
Right.
you have to first and foremost contribute to your own well-being, and that's something nobody teaches you that as a child, as something that often we learn through burnout, through going through all of these experiences.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And even once I was like out of the position, like I kept like, trying to find another position, trying to be like, where am I supposed to be? I feel lost. I feel, like my compass is like spinning. Made it
Yeah,
really difficult.
that you kind of identify with that label because that's like something to hold on to. But we're constantly shifting and changing. So our identities are also constantly, because I think I read your awakening really began in 2012. Is that correct? So
Yeah.
how would you, because we're now 12 years later, how would you feel in those 12 years? How has your identity changed? I know that may be like a
A
difficult
loaded
question.
question. No, it's okay. It's almost like you can see like right where the change happened because having had like a difficult childhood and having experienced like all these sort of like negative things going on, because not only did I have like challenging and like non-nurturing parents, but I also went to school and was getting bullied all the time. So it's sort of like set my outlook as life sucks and then you die. Like it's just like it's always going to be awful. Like so I was
Mm-hmm.
like Miss Nelly negative, it was like there's always stuff to complain about and all that sort of thing. And then the actual catalyst was I started getting sick and it was like, oh my goodness, the life that I, thought that I created as like this like safety from this terrible world, it all started crumbling. And it all was like under the basis of health. Because to me, it was like, if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. Like, so none of that stuff mattered. And that's where this perspective started to shift. Like, okay, it's not life sucks and then you die. Like you can like co-create and start to manifest. And that's where we got onto just before the call. It was like, oh, things seem more difficult these days with manifesting. But I want to say like, 2013, 14, like around that time was like super magical. It was like all synchronicities and experiencing all these different things. And it's like, wow, there's like a bigger world outside of this bubble I created to be safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's been my experience anyway. Like right after this awakening, you have about 1, 2 years, I feel that everything just goes well for you and it just happens. But then God, source, creator, whatever you want to call it, says, okay, that's great. You have now gone through level 1, but now you are ready to step up to level 2, because you have to basically deepen your path. You have to fine tune your soul medicine. So we're going to give you some stuff to do that. And often that's going to be like contrasting experiences, and it's going to not be comfortable. And then we're really being asked to trust what we have been developing. Like, how much do you still trust this path when something happens that you could easily say, well, like, screw all this stuff, I'm done with all this, I'm going back to a normal life.
I've done that a few times.
Yeah, and it's real tempting, but then after a while you still feel the resistance, and I cannot ever go back. That's just not really possible.
It's that saying like ignorance is bliss, you take the blind off and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I can see all this stuff, but it's like, now you can't unsee. Like you can't go back to,
Yeah.
the ignorant version of you. So,
Mm-hmm. No, and because you would always have this feeling like there's something missing. It's almost too easy.
right.
Or this feeling of I should be doing more. I should be doing more.
Right. It's like the weird like nudge and like pull towards it. Because the other thing that's been coming up for me over the last couple years is finding that the old ways of being and doing are no longer working. So it's like when you're presented with something, whether it's a problem or something you need to work through or whatever, it's like if you're like, oh, okay, I recognize this, like I used to do this, this, and this, let's just do it because that's all subconscious. You just do it automatically. And it's like, it really hits the fan once you try to do the same old, same old. So it's very much like, okay, like you're being presented with it. Like, what would you do with it outside of the old ways of being and doing? And it's like in that aspect, I'm feeling like we're all being challenged, or I think you had said earlier, like almost like being tested.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I'm finding that not only for myself, but like a lot of the clients that come and sit with me, I'm like, oh, the old ways of being and doing are no longer working. Like you can't just do that. So for me, I was almost like getting the call of like, oh, you get too comfortable and you do like the same old, and you approach things with the same whatever. They're like, the problem is you need to build a better foundation. So like over the last like 2.5 years, like a lot of like the foundation has been crumbling, and like it's been like a lot of challenges, and it's like, okay, you need to like, scrap it all and create the foundation that you want. So it's like one of the things I recently started doing was more my own like breath work practices. And it happened by accident. Like there was a woman, like a friend of a friend on Facebook, and she's going for like practitioner in breath work. And I was like, oh, I get it. And they had said, oh, she's looking to, run some practice groups, get, her practitioner skills like sharper. And I was like, oh, okay, like I'll, be a student, like I'll see how others do it and, learn that way. And so I went and just, I don't know, things, really weird things were happening on that call. And after that, I was like, okay, I need to like do my own practice. Cause a lot of the clients that come to me, somehow it's like, I'll be telling, giving them the reading, and it's like I'm getting the nudge, like what you're saying is like you need to do it yourself. So I think when we were messaging, a couple days ago, I was like, practitioners almost like need to embody what they're doing, like whatever it is they are practicing or preaching, like they need to actually be doing it in order to share it. So it's like I've been finding, I want to say it's been like at least 3 weeks, I've been doing like my own breathwork practice. So now it's like I set it up like a practice. So I get up, take the dog out, and then I come right back in and just sit down and just start doing breathwork before I even do anything else. And it's been helping like shift the energies like enough that I feel better like doing things. It's having like the ripple effect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that makes sense because imagine, I know this may be silly to compare it to, but like imagine that you work in a restaurant and this cook never tastes his own food. He's just cooking stuff and he's sending it out to the tables. And these people are like, there's something off about this food. I don't feel like the cook is actually connected to the food. And if this cook has been developing these recipes, tasting them, eating his own food, and then he cooks it for clients, he's going to be like, this is the best thing ever. This is my favorite food. I love this dish. I'm going to make this for these people. They're going to love it. You're going to want to transfer that experience to someone else. And clients, people in general, they're going to feel when you're teaching something from experience, which reminds me of what I was telling you a few days ago. What was it again? With I said there was a rumor or a story that I heard about a coach that developed an entire course using AI. And then
Oh
when it came,
yeah. And then
she
people
had
realized
AI.
that she didn't know what she was talking about. Like she had
Yeah,
no like actionable knowledge.
exactly. And basically, it was just like her goal was, I want to make quick money. This is something people want. I'm going to have AI write an entire course, and AI can be very valuable, but we have to be very, this is a little rant. I'm going to try to keep it quick.
Concise.
But like that we have to keep in mind, this is a very valuable tool, but we cannot let it do everything for us because you're eventually just going to, like, people are going to catch on to the fact that you are not actually doing the work yourself.
Right. So how that whole story came out was I had someone who was like new to tarot reading. I mean, in her bio, she wrote that she'd been reading for 23 years. And I'm like, okay, but when you're actually doing readings, like you come off like a novice. So we had gone out to lunch together and we were like talking and like sharing ideas and knowledge and whatever. And I had said, I seek to empower clients in the now. It's not about future tripping and, oh, is everything going to turn out okay? Or I'm going to meet the one or get the job, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, create everything in the now so that that becomes magnetized. So when I had said all of that, she took it and like put it on Facebook, like, oh, hi, I'm a reader. I empower clients in the now. And I know for a fact that she is not empowering herself. She doesn't do the work and she's not all of that sort of thing. So it's like you literally just took like my entire like business foundation and shared it as your own.
Mm-hmm. And the
But
thing
you
is,
can tell she's not walking the walk, right?
exactly, but still, that's unpleasant when that happens. But again, that's kind of a little test, I guess. You could look at it as, okay, God is telling you, that's how I would see it then as a third party. Like, God is then asking you, okay, how are you going to stay in your center when you see someone is stealing something that came from within you and they're just taking it and pretending, like, are you going to go in fear and think, oh no, this person is taking something that I created, that I worked on internally, and now they're saying, oh, this is mine? Or are you going to be able to be like, okay, on a 3D level, like, you're allowed to have your emotions about it because it sucks, somebody just steals your words, but then you're going to be like, okay, yeah, that happened, but it's still my thing. It's my energy. And people are not dumb. People will feel, even if they're not spiritual, people are still going to feel a certain way about other people, I think. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it does make sense. It's because like you said, it's like almost like when you put your blood, sweat, and tears into something and someone else is just like, oh, it's like this, and take it and post it. It's like, because that's what she did. She posted it. So I screenshotted it and I sent it to her, like, oh, how's that going? But for me, it was almost like learning through like trust, because it's like I'm always like, oh, I'm looking for new friends and whatever, and trying to connect with others doing similar work. And it's like, interestingly enough, the day that we had met for lunch, she brought like a used deck of tarot cards, and she's like, oh, I'm giving this to you as a gift. And then, you know, as the day's progressing, she's like, oh, I need to run to the restroom. And I picked up the deck and I started shuffling, and out came the devil card. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna pay attention to that. And it's like, all right,
Huh.
here's this unhealthy like relationship, whatever. So I mean, we don't even talk anymore. So I've made my peace with it, but it's just like, oh, not everyone is genuine. Like you have to kind of not only take what they're saying, but also look at their actions.
And I think sometimes in the spiritual community, it can be very easy to like dive in head first in this entire community. You have an awakening, you're like, oh, there's an entire community of people like me, and you dive into this community, but then you notice all the things that you experienced in the 3D with jealousy or talking behind your back or blah blah blah, like all the emotions that we went through in interactions with people in the 3D, let's call it that. You're still going to
Yeah,
have those experiences in the spiritual community because we're still human beings with human reactions. So
right. It's almost
we
like
have
there's
to
an
keep that in mind.
expectation, like, oh, you're love and light, like you should conduct with love and light. But there's plenty of, you know, competitive folks. There's, oh my God, there's not enough to go around. I need all the clients and things like that. And then there's you know, ways of conducting business, like, oh, it's only about the money. And then there's the other ones that are like the martyrs, like, oh, should this be given away for free? Like we need to be of service. And it's like, you know, polarity. It's very people on opposite sides of belief systems.
Yes, there is plenty of like contradicting ideas, polarizing ideas within the spiritual community. You just have to open TikTok or Threads now, the new Instagram app. That's really like if you want to get angry, install Threads.
Oh
Um,
my.
yeah, it's like I've been on there now for a couple of weeks, and I try to stay out of other people's conversations, and I've noticed it's not always easy. It really triggers the human side of you because it's then like, oh, okay, people are saying this, people are saying this, and you find yourself all of a sudden in the middle of these discussions. And I think it's also smart to keep in mind, like, okay, is it worth it to get in a discussion? Or
Right.
is it just
That's what I was
good
kind
to
of
stay
thinking as
out
you
of
were
it?
talking. I'm like, does it matter at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Because it's almost like
Yeah.
getting into that like keyboard warrior thing. Like it's like
Yeah.
choosing to engage, or you can choose peace and just forget it.
Mm-hmm. And it's definitely not always easy because we want to defend that which we feel is true. And in the end, it's like, okay, does it matter what other people think if I know that what I feel is true for me?
Right. Yeah. That's the inner truth and inner peace, like keeping them together.
So it's definitely also, again, a way for the universe, God, whatever, to teach us about our inner devotion to what we stand for, what we believe in, what we've experienced, and what we want to share with others.
True.
So yeah, no, I remember that post. That was definitely, and that's not the first time that I've come across that story that you now just shared with us about that lady basically stealing your quote. I've had people that I know that have been in this line of work for years, and they said like others stole their entire idea of a course that they had planned. They were working on a course and somebody stole it completely, stuff
Mm.
like that. And it's definitely disappointing, I think, when you are doing this work and you have like the best intentions, and it's really difficult to imagine that other people don't have those same intentions. But in the end, it comes down to fear. Like, why does another person do that? Because they are afraid that what they hold, their soul medicine is not going to be enough. So they're going to try to take something from somebody else, because in the end, they probably feel like they're not valuable enough on their own. This is
So it's
getting very
rooted in fear.
philosophical.
Yeah, it's like, but it's like rooted in fear. It's like that, you know, the core wounding of like not good enough. So it's like even if you show up as you are, like people may not be interested or they may not be moved by your work. So you need something extra or something's missing. So it's almost like,
Mhm.
you know, always chasing that void.
Yeah, and then you see social media is also encouraging everyone, oh, you have to be noticed online. You have to be like making videos. You have to be making posts. You have to be going live. You have to do all these different things to be noticed. And like we've almost come to a time where it's boring to just talk online, have a conversation.
Or just
And
be.
then you have to like dance and be silly, and that may work for some people and that they may really enjoy creating content like that. But then for me, I'm not going to be the one that's going to be making those videos. Like I would much rather have a long nice conversation and share that.
It's
And I
funny
think
because like as you're bringing it up, it's reminding me like when I started out, you know, I started the Hummingbird account back in 2018 and it had maybe like 200 followers just to quantify it. And then I didn't really start like working with it until 2019. So maybe like a year or 2 years later. And then maybe it got up to like 500 followers and I started meeting other practitioners and I would see, you know, they have 1,000 followers or 2,000. It's like, wow, like they're doing the work, they're influencing. And then now it's like being further along, like when this individual came along and was kind of like looking up to me, like, oh, what you're saying is like so good that I need to take it. It's like to be like an actual influencer over another like newbie practitioner. It's almost like seeing it like full circle. Because even when I sat with what was going on, the other side was like, oh, like, congratulations, you're doing something right. Like someone wants to mimic you. And I was like, wow.
yeah, yeah, I remember when I created an image of a golden dragon. This happened, I think, about 9 months ago, and someone just took a screenshot and used it, didn't refer to me anything, and
No.
just like turned it into their own post because it was a really impressive image. And so they took it. And I remember when I saw that completely by accident, because it was not somebody that I follow even, and I saw it on Facebook. And I'm like, wait, and like I immediately recognized the image. And the human side of me came out, and I was like, yeah, you can't just steal somebody's images, blah, 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 blah. And then later I'm like, maybe that was a little too harsh. Maybe I should have also seen it as like, oh, this is a compliment, because this person was clearly so impressed with this image that they decided to use it. And a lot of people are simply not informed on copyright when it comes to visual work, because they never really learned anything about it. And it's because I went to art school that I know about copyright, blah, blah, blah. But most people don't know those things. So they're like, oh, an image, let me screenshot it and use it. And they never refer to the original creator. So I got real mad. And then I was like, well, that was maybe too harsh. And and then I also realized, like, oh wow, this lady thought that my work was good enough to use to like share her own message. And then so I saw the other side of the coin.
Yeah, but still would
Hmm.
have been nice if she was like, you know, found this or credit unknown or something to be
Yeah,
like, this is not my work.
yeah, and it's definitely getting more and more complicated to exclusively claim content as your own, because
Mm,
people, I think that's something you also have to be okay with. What if someone steals your images? What if they steal, like, how are you going to feel in the end? Is it going to make you not want to share? Or is it not going to stop you from sharing because the message is too important? You're still going to keep on sharing. And
right.
then that's kind of what made me realize, okay, that's a risk that happens, can happen. but it's not going to make me stop sharing what I want to share.
Yeah, I feel like a big one that's coming to mind is like the music. Like, you know, some of the like bigger artists are like, oh, we don't get like commission if someone just like steals it and puts it wherever.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and now it's very difficult to keep like control of that, because you can copy everything, you can download everything, you can just,
Mm.
you find
So it's like there's
something
an
you
upside to
can,
the internet and a downside.
yeah, definitely. And it's its own consciousness, I feel, in itself too. It's like a living thing that we can use to our advantage, or we can really misuse it, abuse it, actually.
Yeah. Like I have difficulty, like it's funny because you were saying like, you know, make reels and go live and whatever. Like I have difficulty with being seen, so I like won't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of the things I do is like go on TikTok and like use the filters and like, you know, it's already like the music's playing and whatever. And it's like, all right, that's how I'll show up. But other than that, no.
But that's also the beauty of the internet. It allows for people that would have trouble with being, just placing the camera in front of you. Okay, start talking. No distractions, no blinging lights, flashy stuff, no music, no filters. That would be, then you would not be making any videos. And because these filters are there, they're allowing you to feel more comfortable to still share something online. So, in a way, that is good.
Right. It's like my little crutch.
Mhm. And I think that's why a lot of people do enjoy making the funny reels, the funny things with like text over it and them dancing, because it's an easy way for them to still get their messages across. And it's like how in the beginning, when I started podcasting in 2018, it was just a cover image and me talking. You never saw my face.
Yeah,
And
I think you referred me to that one for certain topics you had covered.
yeah, and that was in the very beginning, because I felt more comfortable feeling like I could like think about my thoughts, and when people just wouldn't see my face, because, or I could hit pause if I felt like, oh, I'm gonna stutter, or I don't know. And
It's
yeah,
that
I
that
think,
piece you talked about earlier. It's like you have to get it perfect, you have to get it right, you have to
mhm,
whatever. And it's like it's just gonna go how it's gonna go.
yeah. And then I learned, and it's also just through experience, and I'm sure you've noticed the same thing, that your clients will have told you like, oh, I like your authenticity, that you're just yourself, that you're not like, it doesn't need to be perfect, and that they can actually relate to you because you're like them, you're just like them, a normal person.
Yeah, I get a lot of the clients, like I said, it'll be, you know, nudges for myself, or like I get a lot of the challenging ones, like whether it's narcissistic relationships or you know, suicides, all kinds of stuff like that comes up. And I'm like, but I always ask like the harder questions. Like if someone's there, like, but I love them. And I'm like, it sounds narcissistic. What's going on here? And, but they could change. And oh, they're probably not gonna, they've already been showing you all along. And then I'll say, like, you know, what prevents you from leaving this person? And it sort of like shocks them so much that it's like, hopefully they'll change or hopefully not. They have free will.
Hmm. Yeah, I remember in the past we talked a little bit about that, narcissistic toxic relationships. Is that something that you are passionate about, that you like, is one of your specialties
I don't know if I
specifically,
would call
or?
it specialty or because it's more like I experienced it, right? My
Yeah.
dad, like if it's a scale, because I'll probably put like a disclaimer before we dive into it. It's not about, you know, labeling people or being like, oh, you're just a narcissist. It's like every person has a little bit of narcissism in them because that's what allows them to stay alive. Like if you didn't care about yourself, like you wouldn't be like, oh no, this is a problem. Let me get out of it or let me change my diet or whatever. But the people that are a little bit more extreme on the scale, it's like they're too much about themselves. But again, it's like the polarity we talked about, you know, you have the challenging folks and then you have the folks that are givers and empathic. And it's like we all kind of coexist. So for me, my dad is one, and he's really high on the scale. Like he's just not a good guy. So I grew up with that. And then, I had my first relationship, which is my ex-husband. We got together when we were like teens, like we sort of like grew up together. And I had seen this video where they talked about, your first relationship, like you don't really know what love is, you just kind of get together and whatever. And then the second relationship kind of like ruins you. And then the third one's the real one. And I'm like, okay. So I had, the first one where we were just kids, we grew up together, and then it kind of fizzled out. And then I got with my son's father. Now there's 6 different types of narcissists. I can't really go into like all of that because I'm not a psychologist or any of that, but he is considered the most dangerous one. He's the covert narcissist, which means you can't tell they're actually a narcissist. It's like done so well that you don't even notice. So they're characterized by failure to launch. Like they're known as, they blame everybody else. It's very much like, oh, I was going to go do this. Like they have grandiose ideas about their capability, but they never actually do anything. So that's what I realized with him. I was like, oh, I'm going to go do this and it's going to be so amazing. And then, oh my God, like the investors didn't come through, or this person didn't give me the materials, or whatever the heck happened, that I just couldn't do it. Like, oh my God. And they're such victims that it's like, oh my goodness, like they'll do anything to stay in the victim role. Because when you feel sorry for them or feel empathetic, they kind of like draw off of that. So it started to come out, summer of 2022. Like I don't know, let his true colors come out. Like we split in 2019, but we tried to stay like amicable because we share a child. So it was like, all right, like I can't just like be like, okay, you're an ex, like see you later, bye. But it started to come out that like he wasn't a good person, and he would always choose himself and whatever he needs, and who cares what anybody else needs. And it's like when you're doing that, when there's a child involved, like that's problematic. And then fast forward to summer of 23, he basically became like unbearable. Like we couldn't stand to be around him because he had lost his job. And even though he was happy, like not going to this awful job anymore, he started like unconsciously taking it out on my son and I. So it was getting like worse and worse and worse. And it was like, oh my goodness. And then it came to a head in January of this year, 2024, because he was reported for suspected child abuse. So I was like, oh my God, like what is going on here? It was like the year of revelations, like everything started to make sense. So it's like I understand like the dynamics of the narcissist and how to like get out of it and try not to like give your power to them. And everything out of their mouth is basically a lie, and it's all sort of bent towards that victim, like, oh, everyone's out to get me. And it's like, are they? So I tend to attract the clients that are going through the same, because it's like, oh, okay, like, what are we doing here? Like, this person's obviously not going to change. I'm sorry. They've already shown you through their actions.
Yeah, and I think there are, so like the way you described it is perfect. You described it perfectly, because I definitely also have a few narcissists in various degrees in my life that I've had to deal with. And that's what made me create my webinar, Celestial Understanding of Traumatic Soul Contracts, because I could see how the soul contracts were forged basically between these parties, the empath, the narcissist, and how a lot of that also went back to past lives and vows, subconscious vows, and the trauma bond basically was already created in a whole other lifetime, basically, so that when you meet them again for the first time in this life, you're like, you're like the deer in headlights. Oh my God, it's you. And you think it's some kind of special connection. Oh no, it's a super karmic connection, but it's going to teach you a whole bunch of stuff.
Right. It certainly did like teach me like, when it all came out in January of 24, like because our past life contracts are all strange, but we had one life where he like did something to me and it like injured my lower back. So like January of 24, that started like coming up because all these fears started coming up. And I was like, so it caused me to like take my power back and like, what am I going to do about this? And what can I, you know, instead of being victimized by it and just falling over and being like, oh no, like this is so terrible. It's like, okay, there's a child involved, which is also in every single lifetime. So we need to figure how
Mhm.
to do it differently and like hold like those stiffer boundaries to be like, no, you can't do that to us anymore. But
Yeah,
for
and
me, just really quick, it was almost like, because people are like, how did you not know? Like, why was it like, how did you like allow this to all happen? And it's like, for me, it was kind of normalized because I grew up in a household that was like narcissistic. So it was like that sort of like energy and behavior is like normalized. And even though it's like, oh, this is happening, it was like familiar, which is terrible. It kept activating my nervous system, but that's almost like why the universe had to come in and be like, all right, we're going to get this guy reported and get the ball rolling because you're just not there. Like, what's going on?
yeah, and I think a lot of people that are not in a situation like that, they cannot understand that your brain is basically altered chemically forever.
Mhm.
If you have gone through narcissistic abuse, your amygdala is way more, it's bigger than the amygdala of a person that has not been exposed to such high amounts of stress. So, what the amygdala also does is if you meet someone and they are narcissistic or they are basically gaslighting you, love bombing you, withdrawing love, it creates anxiety. But you think, oh, this is attraction, but it's actually anxiety. And we confused, well, like I mean, people that have gone through this situation, it's very easy to confuse the two. And so when I um, finally ended up in a really good relationship, it was like, oh my God, this is strange. And I felt this good
Yes, because it's
feeling.
not familiar and you
Yeah.
question it and you like shun it.
And you almost self sabotage it because it is so calm and balanced. And it's like something's going to happen. You're expecting them to do some crazy stuff because that's the way it's always been. But then that never happens.
Yeah. And the other thing is like going along with what you were saying, it's like people mistake attachment for connection. It's like, no, you're like unhealthily attaching to this person when it's not like a genuine connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And narcissism can really come out in a variety of different ways because people often think, oh, narcissists are aggressive. They are,
Oh, there's
um,
6 different types. They're not. It's like, because so like Son's father, he has grandiose ideas about his capability, not inflated sense of self, like grandiose self. Like other people, I can be like, all right, that person's all about themselves and is real grandiose, probably a narcissist. But him, no idea. No idea that's what was going on.
no, because I've definitely met narcissists that were like the constant victim of their life. Like they are always the victim. And
Right.
they would
That's like the
constantly,
one, number one red flag. It's like, oh,
yeah,
but you can't help yourself.
no. And then, of course, like in my case, let's say the last narcissist that I was involved with, everything was always somebody else's fault. Like in every job, in every living situation, that person would get into conflict with the people around them. And when I met that person, they were saying, "Okay, yeah, this is happening," and I was like, "Oh, poor you," and everything, and like, oh, and then after
That
living with
fuels
them,
them. When you do it like that, it fuels them. Like, oh, it
yeah,
feels good. Someone is, you know, giving me their sympathy and empathy.
and then I saw, oh, wait a minute, because we started living together, I started seeing how it was actually always that person's fault, how they were
Mm,
getting into arguments. And I'm like, wait, you're giving me a whole different story. And like, they can also make themselves seem so poor that they need your help, financial help, emotional help. But oh no, if you ask for that same thing in return, how dare you not trust me, blah, blah, blah. And it's,
yeah.
yeah, kind of playing on your like emotional vulnerabilities.
Yeah. Like mine is, loyalty. So like example, one of his friends, like I just call him Bob. So it's like he would work with Bob, like one-off jobs or whatever. And it would be like, oh, how was your day? Like, did you work with Bob? And it's like, oh, like Bob is awful. He's such a terrible person, blah, 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 blah. So awful. I don't want to work for him ever again. And that would trigger my loyalty to be like, oh, Bob's awful. Like, forget Bob. And then the next day I would see him and he'd be like, oh, like my day was good. Like Bob was great. Everything's great. Like I'm going to work for him again and again. And again. It's like, dude, yesterday it's like whiplash. It's like yesterday you literally said like, I don't want to work with him ever again. And now it's like, oh, everything's amazing. It's like, what? Like,
Yeah, they can like flip back and forth between extremes.
mm,
They try to drag you in that cycle, and that is extremely exhausting.
yes. And it keeps you like stuck in this weird cycle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's definitely something, like you said, highly intuitive people that are here to do like heart-based work with other people. They can easily get wrapped up in scenarios like that, and then they're like in there, they've been in the situation for 5 years, 10 years, and then when a person like you says, like, you basically let them face the fact. You're like, you can leave. They're
Right.
in their mind, they're like, no, I can. It's almost like they get a panic attack from the idea of, oh, I can leave.
Yeah.
And
Like he
that's
needed like
something.
almost like a mommy, like someone to do everything. And he just kind of existed under the umbrella. And it was like, I don't want to hold the umbrella anymore. Like, see you later.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I noticed with the last person that had narcissistic tendencies that I was with, that they had severe mother wounds and were
Mm,
basically looking for a surrogate mother in all ways: emotional, financial, material. And then I was starting to just feel really drained because I'm like, I am not your mother. I cannot be your mother. And the moment I said that, he literally threw a tantrum like a child. Like the emotional level was that of a 6 year old. And then I'm like, okay, this is not going to work, because I also saw that this was a pattern. That was not the first time. So that was really a valuable lesson. And now I can say that I think I've learned my lesson, because now I don't have to be the mom anymore. And I can
yes.
definitely feel like, whoo, my central nervous system has just calmed down so much since seeing all these things.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we will attract clients that can energetically, on subconscious level, sense, oh, you have what I need to integrate, basically.
Yeah. Cause like you're talking about the central nervous system. It's like I've been doing a lot of work like for the like nervous system dysregulation and all that stuff. And I didn't realize that it's like, I had a childhood that would like activate it. And then, summer of 23, when he was just so awful to be around and like deal with, it was like it kept like restarting the dysregulation. So it was like I would do all this work, encounter him for like 5 minutes and be all like right back at square one. So it was like a lot of like distancing, like, okay, we share a child, but that's it. Like, don't talk to me. Don't ask me what I'm doing or not doing. Like you can inquire about the child and that's about it.
Yes, and you have to kind of keep that boundary, because they don't see that boundary. You have to constantly enforce that boundary. And that's what I've noticed anyway with clients that have suffered from narcissistic abuse, or people with borderline abuse, histrionic personality disorder. They're kind of all very similar, that they don't even have boundaries for themselves. The victims, let's call them that, people are like, okay, let me just give you more. And then they're like, how can you help me, please? And then it's like, yes, but boundaries. You have to have self-care boundaries. Your energy is not just available for everyone anymore. Like, if you have to be radical for a while and just really isolate yourself, then that's what you need. And then you can little by little make the boundaries more flexible. But the moment that you notice that someone is trying to overstep even just a little bit, that wall is just going to be right back up.
Yeah. And like firm on it, like stand firm. You don't just kind of wishy-washy, like, okay, like that's a boundary, but it's like, no, you have to like stick with it and be like, hard no.
Yeah. Wow, we've definitely covered some interesting stuff already. I'm going to quickly see because there were definitely some things that I wanted to ask you. So you have a master's of science in criminal justice and you teach meditation classes in the correctional system. So is
Yeah,
that
that was
correct?
the last job that I ended up leaving. That was the one where it was like, oh, you're identifying with the job. But so that must be like an old write-up you found. But yeah, I used to
Yeah.
teach it to the women inmates. So it was
Oh,
interesting because like the energy, in the prison system is not like good energy per se, because it's a lot of people under one roof. So it's all different kind of energies mixed in. So it was like having some people that were interested in that was like good, because others were like, oh, I just want to get out of other classes, so I'll just take this one, it sounds easy. But I was lucky enough to get like groups that were actually interested, like they would ask like good questions, and so I felt like they were actually going to go off and maybe start their own practice.
yeah, because I don't know, I found your Facebook page and then I found another page somewhere because I just wanted to, like we have been in touch for a while and I follow your stuff, but I was like, let me see what I can find before we go online. And I did not know that about you, so that is definitely interesting because some listeners may know this, some may not. But I have been, not myself in prison, but I have visited people in prison, and the energy is definitely exactly like you described. You feel a lot of negative energies, and
Yeah,
not
it's
necessarily,
like dense.
yeah, not necessarily people that are actively like wishing to do you harm, but it's more like all of their
No.
trauma,
Yeah, in
their
one
heaviness.
space. Right.
Yeah. And I, back at the time when I was visiting people there, I was aware of the fact that I was an empath, but I was not doing any spiritual work yet. This is like long, long ago. And I could really feel, I had to like decompress after coming back from visitation. I had to just decompress for the rest of the day. And I now realize, of course, it was because I was absorbing all of these people's energies and their pain, their sadness, their grief,
Mm.
all the stuff. And it comes up. So I definitely think that when some of them like find out about meditation or they start practicing it, those are going to be valuable tools because the prison system in itself, it does not really encourage rehabilitation. It's all about just punishment or getting out of society's way, but is it really helping? Often they come out of the system, I feel, and we're getting a little sidetracked, but they come out of there even more of a criminal sometimes because there's
Sometimes
gangs,
it
there's
depends, right? It depends like who are they talking. It's like even people on the outside. It's like who are you sort of like mixing with? What is it you're taking in? Like what are you paying attention to? Like all of that sort of thing. I mean, they do have success stories. Like they're people that went in there for the first time and it's like, oh, never again. Like I don't want to do this. And they can do things like get their you know, graduation equivalency and like try to help set up to
Mhm.
like get work on the outside. And there's certainly a lot of people that do that. And then they do offer like different classes and stuff to even just develop skills. Like people work in, they do like horticulture, like gardening, they do, cooking, like things like that. They'll work in the kitchens, like, and these are obviously folks with like lesser offenses. So like they're the types that are gonna like try and try to be different. But then there's all different kinds of stories, like there's individuals that ended up in there and like they end up estranged from their family, so their energy, the energy of abandonment, is in there. Then there's the traumas,
Mhm.
there's self-shaming, like I can't believe I did that or whatever, and that
Yeah.
sort of thing, like all of that is in there.
Yeah, and I definitely believe that for many of them, when they get a visit, whether that's from a stranger that's going to come teach them about meditation, or whether that's from a family member, that makes their day. Having just somebody from the
Right.
outside that comes in and shows, hey, I took time out of my day to come spend it with you. And I think that's very valuable. And so, yeah, that was definitely really cool to find out about you. I did not know that.
Yeah. It's funny because that was part of like the awakening process. So I was, essentially doing work what others were telling me to do. Like my parents were like, oh, go get a job as this or go get a job as that. Because I had sort of become disconnected from self, having gone through that difficult childhood. It was like you just need to survive, right? You were talking about the difference in the brain and all that sort of stuff. And it's like you're become hyper vigilant and like hyper focused on survival. You don't care what you're going to be doing for work or not or what. It's like, how do I just survive? So long story short, I was taking in all these different jobs and like career paths based off of what everyone else was telling me. And the universe was like, can you stop? So for where I live, there's an entrance exam to get into like the master's programs. And essentially, I didn't score high enough to get into any of the regular programs. Like I was looking at just doing business or whatever and doing something generic just to get through. And it turned out the only program that would accept anyone without that exam score was criminal justice. But once I got in there and I started, attending police meetings and what like the energy and like their sort of like how they are, I realized I had like found my people. I was like, oh my God, I'm so lit up. I love the concepts. I love, spending time with them, like all of it. So it was like, oh, this is so different than like corporate. Because corporate, I pictured myself like being a cog in a wheel. And it was like, I can't really make myself do that, even though it's like, oh, it sounds easy.
Because you feel like you're actually making a difference in an individual's life. You can see the reactions right away. You can feel the effect that you're having. Whereas when
Right.
you're working, like, you don't just feel like a number. You actually feel like you shifted energy with you, with what you contributed to somebody else's life. And I think
Yeah.
that's what we all really want when we get in touch with that intuitive side of life. That's what we want. It's like whether you do it through tarot readings, meditation, exercises, breath work, Reiki, it doesn't matter, or just like wellness, massage, it doesn't matter. I think that's what everyone is looking for, to contribute something like that to another person. And that's why I this is getting a whole like a little bit sidetracked, but like society and how we work, how businesses are built, it's all changing, I feel, because people have that desire to be of deeper service.
Yeah. I feel like you're talking about, the progression, because like way back when humans went into farming, right? And then the farming went into the industrialization, right? Textiles and like all that sort of stuff. And then it went into manufacturing, like what are we making and like selling. And then it went into corporate, like, oh, how are we doing business? Like, what are we doing and whatever. And now it's like moving into service, like, what are we doing for each other and how can we help each other?
Mm-hmm. And it's just a natural consequence of every individual being confronted with the fact that this is getting a tiny bit galactic, but the planet is moving in the cosmos, and we are moving through a photon belt that is going to cause us to basically have this awakening, because it's like speeding up, it's speeding up, it's speeding up. It's this
Right.
energy
And it feels
that
like
is
the lessons
speeding.
are coming faster and faster.
And even people that were never interested in consciousness, meditation, past lives, blah, 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 inner child work, they are now reaching out saying, I was never into any of this, but now I feel like I can't look away. I need to do some of these practices, because there's clearly stuff, like you said, a little bit ago, like the stuff that used to work in the past just isn't working anymore.
Right. It's almost like everyone's foundation is sort of being challenged or crumbling. There's two
Yeah.
extremes, right?
And that's why you'll also see people saying, oh, the world is a mess, the world is a disaster. And then you have other people saying, no, the world is waking up. And you have these 2 points of view, especially with politics now the way that they are. Some people are extremely optimistic, other people are very pessimistic and say it's chaos, why would anyone want to be here right now? And other people are saying, but can you not see it? We are all waking up, we're starting to see it. And it doesn't mean that one person is right, the other is wrong. They are both right in because they both hold a piece of the puzzle, I feel.
Right. And there's two different like viewpoints. There's people that are like, wow, what a wild time to be alive. And there's other ones that are like, this is so awful. Like, can we just not anymore?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's you can even feel both of these emotions simultaneously. And that's extra confusing because we are so used to, oh, either you feel sad, you feel happy, you feel angry. You can feel really euphoric and very sad at the same time about certain things. And at the same time, on a soul level, you can realize this is what everyone wanted to experience, to be here on this planet now and to see this, what is happening now. And at the same
Right.
time, you also feel all this old energy coming up. Like you said, this foundation is being completely annihilated because there's a whole new foundation that has to be created. And you can feel the grief of having to release a lot of the old stuff.
Yes. It's a lot. That part is a lot because I said the ones that are like, can we just not anymore? Like, bleh, it's like those are the ones that are really feeling it. They're really almost like transmuting it, even though it's so terrible and they don't want to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you can definitely tell, like, a lot of people, they will feel that way, but there's still going to be this part of them that's like, but I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to quit, but it does mean that it doesn't feel good. And that's what we need to embrace, probably more in a spiritual community. Like, it's fine. You can say, oh, today was a shitty day. I had a real shitty day or something. And that doesn't mean you have to identify with, oh, my life is shitty. That's not what that
Yeah,
means.
it's
It
like it's
means,
one instance. It doesn't like
mm,
it doesn't, what's the word? Sort of like tell the whole picture.
yeah. And that it's okay to experience all these different emotions because you're constantly moving through energy. And it's like you said, if you have good practices like breath work, if you have a breath work routine, or maybe for somebody else, it's they go for a walk in the morning and then they drink a cup of tea and they just meditate, like they sit and they just think and clear their mind for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever works for you. But if you have something like that, that no matter what's going on, it's going to be easier to deal with all these changes.
Or it's more like having those practices to come back to, right? To help
Yeah.
yourself like rebalance, re-regulate, like that sort of thing. Because it's like, it's almost like the card that I have for the Two of Pentacles, right? That's creating balance in your life. And there's an individual like standing on a board and they've got the two pentacles in their hands. And there's literally like a cat coming, like they're going to knock the board. So it's like, I always look at the cat as like life because like you're standing on your little foundation. But if the cat hits it, it's like it's going to tip. But if you have your practices and everything to come back to, it's almost like you can help yourself manage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so if a client comes to you and they are like, okay, I'm going through a bunch of crazy changes, or I have changes that I need to make and I don't know what to do. What would be like 3 really easy tips that you would give people to kind of create that foundation for themselves?
So since you said like, what can they do? Like 3 simple things. The first one I would say is simplify. A lot of times people become lost or disconnected because there's too much info coming at them and too many possibilities that they don't know which one. And then they start to get into the perfection. Like I have to get it right the first time. So it's like, try to simplify whatever it is you're trying to do or decisions, like try to run it through your values, run it through like your guidance system. Like, does it feel like a heck yes? Does it feel like you're shrink down? Like how is your body reacting? So I usually tell them that. And then another one is reconnecting with self. Like when you're going too external, like, oh, I saw this on the news, or the economy is terrible, or these awful things are happening. And it's like you're coming from like the fear voice and it's too external. So I tell them to come back into themselves. Like, what are some practices, whether it's meditation or journaling, to help them with the, processing the emotions, like whatever it is that's causing them to go external, like try to work with that and come back inside. Because it's like you are your best radar for sort of like managing whichever way you want to go. And some people are like, well, I don't know what I want. And that's, the disconnect, whether it's from childhood or abuse or whatever. So it's like, how can you reconnect with yourself? And then the last one, it's almost like how to like follow your inner guidance, right? Like it's that saying, like as above, so below. So it's like if your soul is up there and your soul knows everything, it's like, how can you slow down enough? Because so many people will get into like, I'm this old, I feel like I should have this, and this done, or my life should be so different. I pictured it so differently. It's like you have to have the radical acceptance to be like, it didn't turn out how you thought it was going to be, but you have to be like, all right, this is the cold, hard look of exactly how it is. And where do I want to go from here? Because a lot of people are always future tripping, like, oh, like, I want to get way over there. It's like, but you're here. And the more you try to get over there, the universe is going to keep you here. Because whether there's lessons or something you're supposed to be doing in order to get over there, it's like you have to radically accept where you are.
Yeah, and that is, I think, like the most important thing, even for us people that have been on this journey, blah blah blah. Like, yeah, people are going to look at us and think, oh, you have it all, you've got it all figured out because you're doing this work, you're on social media, blah blah blah. And it's like, no, we are constantly bringing ourselves back to the now. Constantly we are doing the things that we teach to others every day. We are doing those very same things. It's like, okay, I'm going to be 38 in a couple of weeks, and I catch myself thinking, well, okay, I'm 38, that's 2 years away from 40. What have I actually done with my life? And then I'm
No.
like, and
Then you
then I'm
start to
like,
judge it.
yeah. And then I think, okay, let's go back 10 years into the past when I was 28. And 28-year-old version of myself, if she would see me now, like she would be like, wow, you built this whole business, you're mentoring people, you're doing all this psychic work for people, the stuff that you were so afraid of talking about openly, what? And you're doing all this, high five, basically. And that puts it in perspective and brings you right back in the now, because then you realize, oh, I'm actually doing the stuff that I would have loved to be doing 10 years ago, and I'm now doing it.
Yeah. Another one is a reminder to like slow down. Like I always want like the quick satisfaction. Like, oh my God, I want everything like yesterday. Like for some reason everyone expects everything to like happen right away. And I don't know if it's, because of like the internet and social media or whatever, but it's like they're like, oh, I want to do this. And it's like, why isn't it happening? I give up. Like, and like you talked about the testing, like but for me, the slowing down, it was like because my nervous system was so activated and dysregulated. It's like I couldn't slow down. I couldn't be present. Like that's why meditation is not my favorite thing for myself. Like I can teach it and lead others through it. But for me, it's like doing the breath work, getting the nervous system to shift is important, but also it helps me to slow down. So one of the things from the universe is they always show me the damn turtle, which there's 2 meanings to the turtle. It's like slow down like a turtle, but it's also commitment to the path. Like the turtle will always stay on the path.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, you have to slow down, and like even hurrying through your day, whether you feel like you're going to be late or whatever, and you start hurrying, and oh my God, that's activating to the nervous system, because the nervous system is just watching, and it's like, oh no, like what's going on? Like you're hurrying, and it starts to activate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like meditation. People always think, oh, if you're not meditating, you're not spiritual enough. I
Mm.
and I tell people there's different ways that you can bring yourself into a meditative or self-hypnotic state. And for me, I can be crocheting or drawing
Yes, I
the
was gonna
house.
say sometimes like you can meditate just doing the dishes, because you just
Yeah.
focus on like, how does the water feel on your hands, and like you're like scrubbing the plate, and like just be really, really present. Like that's a form of meditation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because when you go look at the mystery schools, sure, they did traditional meditation, but the majority of their mystical experiences were achieved by doing simple everyday tasks like farming, building together, stuff like that, harvesting the stuff that they grew, working together in group, cooking, stuff like that. That's what, like, the Essene community, for instance, most people know the Essenes from Jesus. Jesus was born an Essene, and basically he was a carpenter. His dad was a carpenter, but he was also a master alchemist. His
Mm.
father Joseph was a master alchemist who very much enjoyed building furniture. And I think it's good for us to not like float away in this
Or
whole
make it like too
spiritual thing.
mystical that it's like,
Yeah. Hmm.
unachievable.
Yeah, because there can be like, you can have real meaningful experiences just working with your hands, doing something you enjoy doing. That's why a lot of people think, oh, if I'm not some kind of spiritual oracle, then I'm not doing it right. Like, you can be a cook and be a conscious cook and put love and intention into the food you're cooking, and you can be doing exactly what your soul wanted you to do.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like have a willingness to start, but also let yourself off the hook. Like, when I started learning about all these different spiritual practices, like example, journaling, there's so many different ways to journal. Like you can get journal prompts and just answer the questions. Like you're just literally writing whatever, the question prompts, or there's bullet journaling, like you write a little bullet and like just keep going. There's also something they call morning pages, and it's like you wake up before you even go to the bathroom, before your feet like hit the floor. It's like just grab like 3 pages of paper and just write, just whatever comes to mind, just write it, let it out. And so many people were like, going on social media and being like, it's amazing, and like I get so many insights, and I feel like it's my soul talking to me. And I tried it, and like I was like, what do I write? And like, nothing's coming. And like, and it just wasn't for me. And it's like, if I kept beating myself up and kept trying it, it's like, if it's not doing anything, like, let it go and try something else. Just allow yourself
Mhm.
to follow your interests and just try different things, as opposed to, oh no, it didn't work, I'm never doing anything ever again.
Yeah. So it's like, no two spiritual journeys are ever going to be the same. No advice is ever going to be the same. Like, you can give person A advice, and person B is going to need completely different advice.
Right.
Hmm. And that's something that I definitely noticed through experience. Because in the beginning, when I just started my mentorship a few years ago, I had this whole mentorship program completely done. Like, week 1, we do this, week 2, we do this, blah, 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 blah. And I was trying to do the same program with all of my clients. And after barely 1 month of working with 3 different clients, I had to just completely get rid of all my planning. And I
Because
said,
it was
no.
like too cookie cutter.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I was doing 3 completely different journeys with 3 different people. And so I just kind of rewrote that entire page right away after I published it a few years ago, and said, it is whatever you need it to be. This mentorship journey is whatever you need.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah.
just kind of go as it comes, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like
And
you
that's
have to have
why,
structure, but you have to have flow.
yeah,
Like it can't be like too rigid, too cookie cutter.
because it's like you noticed it too. Like, this works for me, this doesn't work for me. Oh, but this may work super well for my
Yes, but
client.
you have to notice things like the perfectionism, like people will beat themselves up endlessly because they're not getting the results that others are. And it's like, let yourself
Yeah.
off the hook. Like it doesn't have to be so like serious, so like do or
Mm-hmm.
die.
Yeah, and you can even see it, like if people, they'll come to me and say, oh, you see all these images, you are so clairvoyant, you're so psychic, blah 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 blah. I wish I was that clairvoyant. And I'm like, but you know everything. You literally know things and you just know them. Like nobody can convince you it's any other way, because you know it inside of you and you can feel the truth. And I have to interpret messages. Like I have to interpret what I see. But now I've come to a point where I've have a pretty good developed like system where I can feel things, I can see things. But in the past, before I started this work, I was mainly relying on my visions, on what I was seeing. And I was explaining them to people, telling me, I wish I had your clear sight. Like, yeah, but then you don't feel it. You still have to interpret what you're seeing. So you should never compare your gifts to how another person
Mm.
experiences their soul.
Or
Or
expresses how they express
yeah,
it. But
because we
what's
all, yeah, definitely.
oh, what's
And
interesting is like almost like you're showing like your evolution as a practitioner. Like you started out with like a specific style and then you like, changed and grew yourself as you went. And
mhm,
then what your offerings were all changed. Cause it's like people think like, oh, like you're gonna go out and just do tarot readings or you're gonna just do this, whatever it is that they do. And it's like everybody changes. They change their offerings, change like some people might start out teaching Reiki and just, attuning others and doing it that way. And then they may get into tarot readings or they may get into, doing healings or doing whatever. It's like it always changes.
mhm, because I think we also connect to different aspects of our soul, different incarnations that kind of come online. And in one
Right.
past life, you may have been a healer. In another past life, you may have been uh, like working with herbal medicine. And then in another lifetime, you were a painter. And then in this life, you'll have all of a sudden this painter aspect of you is like, oh, I need to get creative. I need to somehow infuse my business with more creativity. And then you suddenly get this attraction to working with herbal medicine. And then all of a sudden you add energy healing. And suddenly you are a whole different person than you were 10 years ago when you started your practice. And that brings
Right.
us right back full circle to the beginning, where I asked you, like, how can you see that your identity has shifted since 2012? So now we're kind of back at the beginning. And I think this is probably a good moment to wrap it up kind of for today, because this was definitely a filled conversation with a lot of interesting topics. And is there anything that you would like to share before we end? Things that you would like people to know? I'm also going to post all your information in the description, but anything specific that you would like to share?
Well, as mentioned in the beginning, you can find me on Instagram at Hummingbird Energy Healing. And then the name of my podcast show is Ready, Set, Share, which we share healing journeys to sort of like inspire others and let them know that they're not alone.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm also going to share the podcast in the description. Definitely go check out Beverly's podcast, because she has just a very nice way of podcasting. And your conversations are very comfortable to listen to. They're fun, they're interesting. So go check that out. And anything I want to add? No, this was just very fun. Thank you.
Yeah, it
And
was really
maybe
good.
you'll have to come on maybe for a part two.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.